Hello and welcome to another episode of Simply Awesome People. Our guest today is Yulia Denisova. Yulia is a senior HR leader who has worked in multiple large organizations across the globe, including Fanatics, where she is the VP of Talent Development, Coca-Cola, and British Petroleum in the past. With this, allow me to welcome Yulia to Simply Awesome People. Yulia, welcome.
Tushar, thank you so much. And thanks for the invite. I very much look forward to the conversation today. A couple of words about me. As Tushar mentioned, I've worked in multiple organizations. I started in consulting. I think overall 30 years of experience, but then pretty much have done everything in HR and found my true passion in total rewards and in talent and development. And for the last 10 plus years, I've been leading talent in global organizations, in global context, in Africa, in Middle East, in Europe, and very recently now in North America. I'm excited by HR and our profession in general, but more importantly, the technological advancement, the AI, and how we can harmonize and create an effective synergy between the human potential and the technology potential of the technology to win together in the future.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Yulia. Let's jump into our topic, which is leadership. In your extensive experience of working with so many large firms and also globally, and having worked so closely with senior leadership, what is that one consistent leadership trait that separates great leaders that actually deliver results from those who just look like leaders on paper?
It's a great question. In my practice, I would actually say it's genuinely caring for people. Because as leaders, we are facing different situations. We can have high-performing teams. We can have great superstars in our teams, but we can also be in situations where we need to turn performance around and provide honest feedback and effective coaching to our teams to actually help them improve their performance. And in whatever scenario in the situation, I think if you do that with the right attitude, if you do that with the, having the best interest of our people at heart, and providing even tough feedback, difficult feedback, having this difficult conversation, but doing this caring about the outcome, caring about the impact and the effect that conversation will have on the person, it actually goes a long way, and it helps it helps the message to land. And for the person to actually hear the feedback and act on that feedback. So in all of those years of experience, I think you can have leaders who are very passionate. You can have leaders who are very experienced. You can have leaders who may not necessarily have those years of leadership experience, but if they care about learning, about improving themselves as leaders, creating the right environment in their teams, being the best leader they can be for their people, that always generates beautiful results and great outcome, a win-win outcome for the team and for the leader.
Makes sense, and thank you so much for sharing that. Hiring leaders from the industry is also one of the most strategic and, in my experience, one of the most difficult thing to do for any organization. Now, when you are interviewing leaders or candidates for leadership roles in your organization, interviews could sometimes be just one single conversation. It could be a half an hour, 1 hour, or maybe 2 hours-ish.
Right.
In those short conversations, right, what is that one common, or what is that one thing that you're looking at from to gauge a potential leader's leadership strength or qualities?
So if I understand the question correctly, it's what truly differentiates in the interview, seeing multiple candidates, a very strong a future leader, someone with a higher leadership potential versus a regular candidate, right?
Yes. And in the context of the limited time and perspective that an interview allows.
Okay, sure. I don't know if it's actually just one thing or, a mix of things, but in potential and leadership scalability, leadership effectiveness, it's not necessarily always easy to measure, right? And you cannot necessarily spot those things in an interview. I mean, to your point, it's just 30 minutes or an hour or a couple of hours. You could get the tips, you can get some instincts, you can get some signals of, potentially this becoming, a strong leader in your organization and, a great talent and with higher scalability. But then you will actually need real life observations. You will need data, potentially maybe taking the person through the talent assessments and getting tangible data on the table to help, validate your assumptions or share a different perspective and kind of engage in a more rich conversation. But I think usually, from all of the years of my experience of dealing with high potential candidates and high potential talent, there are things they have a much stronger learning agility. So they learn much faster. Even in situations when they're failing and they were not set up for success, they can fail, right? It's not always about winning, but they bounce back much faster. They apply those learnings from the past experience much faster into highly ambiguous and, a new situation. So the actual, pace of learning is, I think, according to research, 4 times faster higher compared to a regular employee. So I think in that interview, you can actually see how they're talking about their learning. You can see the pace of growth that they've had in other organizations. That pace of learning equals much more frequent change of roles in the organization. They have more capacity. They generate 4 times more output compared to regular employees. So they generally tend to double head, quickly move into strategic projects, have additional things kind of added to their scope. So by listening to their story, how they were growing in other organizations, how quickly they were moving, into different roles, what kind of projects they were dealing with, what kind of learning they were generating through that project, that's something that will give you those first signals that you may be onto something here and you may actually, found that gem that you can then test in the real life environment in your organization. The other thing that really differentiates people with stronger potentials is their EQ. It's their, those human-centric, durable skills. Usually these are the most empathetic people that you would know, people with much higher level of emotional intelligence. So by how they're performing in this interview, behaving in this interview, how they're able to read the room, to read, the questions, whether when you see them later interact or, just by whatever questions you're asking in that interview, them talking about those settings, their learnings, how they're reading those not always, kind of obvious clues and how they're internalizing them, analyzing them, and converting them to actual tangible impact that changes the situation. That's something that gives you that opportunity to potentially see higher potential versus the regular person.
Fair. I was talking to a very senior recruiter that does recruiting of executive leadership members. And in that conversation, they were mentioning to me that they were having a chat with a potential executive leadership member, and this was an initial conversation. So the person hadn't gotten into the interview rounds yet. This was a conversation that happened right after they were sourced from the market. And the candidate, this executive leadership candidate, asked this very senior recruiter that a question which was, what's your severance package, or what's your exit package? And this question wasn't taken positively by the senior recruiter. In their perspective, they felt that this candidate was more worried about their failure in the role or their ability to succeed in the role over what they would bring to the table to make things work. Now, this recruiter actually works for a company that has a very nice culture. It's and from their perspective, they do not have the mindset of just letting people go because few things didn't work out. But the candidate does not know about this. And from the candidate's perspective, if I'm assuming, they are taking a big plunge of getting into a new organization, a new culture altogether. And from their perspective, they are thinking about themselves, their financial well-being, maybe their family also, while they're asking this question. But the outcome of them asking the question in this situation was unfortunate, where they were discounted from the candidature or for the in the evaluation of this role. What is your perspective when a candidate asks such a question?
I mean, I found that interesting. Thanks for sharing this example. I personally have never experienced in my 30 years, of tenure with different organizations on the executive level, those type of questions, right? But I think everything depends on a context, right? Like in what you are describing, I think spending a little more time as a recruiter and actually trying to understand why is this person asking that question. It could be that they're in a very brutal organizational culture in an environment today. It could be, I know there's a lot of angst. I mean, we're all a part of that, right? And fear globally because of AI and the impact, job security fears, right? There are layoffs happening on the, consistent basis globally today. And, if that involves relocation, to your point, right, it involves, impact on the family and the financial well-being of the family. It's all understandable. So I would just go deeper into why. But I think, just putting myself also into the shoes of the candidate, if I am considering the move, I want to be successful. I want to make sure that I can actually stay a part of this organization for a meaningful time to create that, tangible impact. If I join already getting myself mentally ready for potential failure, am I setting myself up for success here, right? So I think it's a little bit of both, understanding, the candidate's perspective, but also sharing more about, that potential employer and being, if you're in the process, wanting to win that process, wanting to be successful, wanting to, to change things around, turn things around, in whatever context that you will find yourself in. I don't know if,
No, that makes sense. My perspective on that was essentially, and I'm thinking from the perspective of the candidate here, I think they should be a bit tactful in when and how they ask this question and to who they ask this question.
Right.
I do think this is a valid question. However, I think it would be more better if this executive leadership candidate is asking this question once they are through into a few more rounds, and when they have built a certain degree of rapport with somebody from the hiring team.
Right.
And
I agree.
yeah, and to your point, then provide the context to the hiring team, where the question is then seen from a particular context, then it just coming off as this person's not genuinely invested or not thinking about their success in the role.
Yes. Everything communicates. You're absolutely right. I agree with you. Once you have the offer and you have, the overview of the policies or, kind of closer to that end, once it becomes a tangible opportunity and you are thinking through logistics, mechanics, the actual, financial impact, and all kinds of scenarios for yourself and your family, I mean, it becomes more appropriate to actually, ask this and many other potential questions, right, related to relocation and whatever else that could be. But doing that up front in the very beginning of the process, it kind of sends the signal, a potentially wrong signal that, okay, I am considering this move, but it's only for a short term, potentially, a potential change. So
Makes sense.
Unfortunate outcome for, I guess,
Sure.
for that particular case.
And honestly, I won't be surprised if there are many such situations happening in many organizations. Thanks for the perspective. If I were to flip this and think from an internal perspective, and I'm now thinking about succession plannings or training and helping individuals grow into leadership roles within the organization. And you have worked with large global organizations. Many of them are Fortune companies. Some of them are Fortune 100 companies also. British Petroleum, Coca-Cola. These are behemoths. Have so many people have a history and if not a legacy in the industry. And in doing so, how a lot of times when individuals work in an organization for a very long tenure, what also happens is, let's say they assume a leadership level role after being in the company for a couple of decades. All they have seen about leadership or learned about leadership is internally. And no one, sometimes they are not specifically trained on succession planning. What should a leader do to prepare themselves for succession planning in your experience? And is there any help in your perspective that HR can specifically offer them to train themselves on succession planning?
Yes, of course, to all of your questions. So I think where I've started with having the best interest of your people, at your heart and mind, like walking into this process, knowing that you want the best for your people. I've seen in some cases, succession planning conversations, talent reviews, when you're talking about potential and where you're talking about, the readiness of your successors, becomes a little bit of a battle where leaders are so much pushing their, people forward, not always listening to feedback, not always hearing other people's perspective or challenging their perspective. So I think, and by doing this, they're potentially actually creating a more difficult situation for the person, himself or herself. They're not ready for that position. They don't necessarily have that stronger potential. With potential comes accountability, comes responsibility, comes the extra expectation for, more output, for higher resiliency, for higher empathy, for all of those things that differentiates high potentials, right, from the rest of the candidates. So having your person's best interests at heart, walking into that process, knowing that you want them to be ready when they're ready, you want to provide that coach and you want to provide that development. You want to hear the perspectives of others because, stakeholder management is important. You've got to have the consensus. You've got to have, everyone's buy-in. That's, when everything, all pieces of the puzzle kind of lock in, that's when that move happens. That's when everyone supports that potential succession candidate. As an HR organization, we're the facilitators of this process, and our role and responsibility is to teach the process to all participants, to all people leaders, to actually explain. So we're setting up the discipline, what's that categorization of the readiness? What is that outcome that we want to achieve? What is a healthy succession pipeline? How many ready now successors? How open or not open are we to external market and considering, external successors? All of that, there is like a deep expertise and school of thought in terms of what is a good practice for succession planning. And our role as HR professionals is to help facilitate that conversation with our executives, with our people leaders, and explain, the all of the dimensions of that process. So that's on us. In terms of, what the leaders can do right away, I think is first know their people. We don't always spend enough time actually understanding them as humans, understanding their aspirations, creating that, two-way trust and communication where people can come to us and say, I'm not mobile. Please do not consider me for those positions because I'm taking care of my elderly parents. And for the last 3 years, I really want to be close with them, or 5 years, and I cannot consider global opportunities regardless of how great those opportunities could be, right? It requires that open communication channel, that trust to be able to do that. Or saying, I'm actually good where I am. I have ambition, but I do not want to become the CHRO, in the next 5 years. I'm taking things slowly. I need to be with my family. My personal priorities have changed and things like this, right? So spending the time as a leader first on truly getting to know your people, their context, their personal situation, their professional aspirations, all of the experience. I've seen in many cases where we focus on just what we're seeing in this company and our own experience with this person. We forget all those brilliant projects and all of those great skills that the person actually has by working in other organizations. So investing time in building a holistic understanding of your person so that at any point in time when anyone asks you as the leader the question, what do you think? Would this person be interested? Is that in line with aspiration? You are not in the position where, let me check, I don't actually know, because you have that understanding and you're doing that on a regular basis, checking in, and making sure that you have an accurate representation of that person.
Makes sense. You made a point about getting to know your people. And so it may sound like a very obvious thing if for anybody or any leader for that matter. They'll be like, yeah, I know how to get to know my people. I am investing enough time, and a lot of times the investment of time by the leader is them working with other people on a project or observing them on work projects, and this happens to, I think, most and some of the most successful leaders in the industry, where they're so busy in solving the business problem. They're so busy or not just busy, but so passionate about solving the business problem or solving a problem for their clients, where most of their interactions with their team members or up and coming leaders is in the context of that work. And they would very rarely actually go down the route of knowing the person, wanting to know about their hobbies, their passions, their interests, their personal situations at certain times. And a lot of times, right, what also happens is some leaders also tend to not be natural extroverts. So their natural inclination is to avoid conversations that may not be in the realm of quote unquote work. Have you, or what is your perspective on that? Is that also your observation, where leaders feel that they think that they're investing time to know their people, but are they really trying to know their people, or are they genuinely investing that time? Going back to it's again something that you said at the beginning, that being available for your people, or knowing, being invested in your people. What's your observation, perspective?
I mean, I've been reflecting, as I was listening to your question on my experience. I was privileged to work in good organizations where, I don't think they're intentionally bad leaders who are just focused on work, or who are, focused in, some bad situations on creating miserable experience, for the teams. I've actually experienced good humans and good leaders who enjoy being together and doing beautiful work together with their people. Some of them may be more experienced, some of them may be less experienced as leaders, but there's that genuine passion and the genuine interest in humans, right? And that you are interacting with on a regular basis. So I think, not in my experience, right? So I've actually seen people being natural and casual about just the personal interactions. And I think as a part of any leadership baseline training that people are going through once they get into the leadership positions, there is conversation about engagement. There is conversation around teamwork. There is conversation around trust and how you build trust. And that is a part of building that open and collaborative and trustworthy environment in your team. Creating the opportunity for casual and not always work related talk. So I've been lucky.
Anchoring on your experience, right, where you're saying that most of the leaders that you have had the experience of working with were genuinely or naturally invested in knowing their people. I'm sure there is an element of the organization's culture, because of which a larger majority of people and the leaders were naturally good at these things. Think because if it's a larger end size of leaders that were naturally good and naturally invested, I'm sure the organization had certain attributes in their culture that was supplementing this kind of leadership behavior. What was that, or is that even making sense? Or
yes. Yeah, I think so. I think, what comes to mind is an experience I've had, for example, with one of my companies where we were rolling out the growth mindset and growth behaviors, right? And that was happening a little bit before pandemic, and pandemic just made it so tightened the need and the urgency to transform how we think about leadership and what are the leadership expectations, what are those behaviors that we want our leaders to model. One of the specific changes was, historically, you would be a deep subject matter expert. As a leader, people would come to you and they would expect you to have the right answer or seek that right answer and, share it with confidence, with your leadership confidence in your voice. And I think as all of the workplace and the external environment has changed, and pandemic kind of just created that very specific context for all of the organizations and leaders, it increases more vulnerability. It increases more, I don't have all of the answers. I am a human being. I'm a person just like you are. I have more experience. I may know certain things, but let's actually work together to find that answer. Being okay, being, vulnerable in a way of not having that, 200% correct answer all the time. But, showing energy and ability to find that answer, whatever that answer is. So we were making that transformative change, and I think it was not an existing ability, it was a shift, for our leaders in that organization. But it started from a very top of the house where, the C-suite was showing their vulnerability. They were open about that. And then what makes it effective is embedding that leadership expectation into all HR practices. So go and starting with hiring. It is embedded in your interview process, into your questionnaire, into your assessments. You're hiring people based on those who have that in their DNA, who are more natural kind of change agents of that culture that you're wanting to create. Going into performance management, that becomes your leadership behavior. That is the how you want your leaders to lead, right? But all of that is possible only when there is awareness. People actually know what you want them to do, what is expected of them as leaders, and that's very, kind of specific communication work that also needs to take place.
Makes sense. I was having had lunch with a senior leader in a firm last week, and they had basically switched their job and took a role in another large firm. And during that lunch, and this was my first time interacting with this person, at least on a personal level. So I was asking them a bit about their background and how they reached the point in their career that they are at and things like that. And one of the things that this person shared with me was, when right after they graduated, they wanted to join General Electric, GE. And to be able to join GE, they actually took a program in a very specific school that was hiring from GE. And I was a bit amazed to the fact that an individual who is still in school, or not even in school before they might have made that decision, makes a decision to pick a school that hires individuals from a very specific organization. And in this example, that's General Electric. And and I was very curious. I asked him that what was that you knew or saw in GE that made you make such a big decision of your career, if not life, right, at that point. And this person was very quick in giving me a response. He said that one, he thought that he had read about Jack Welch's book, The Welch Way, and in that book he had read a lot about create a culture, forming organizations, building teams for scale. And he was very impressed by that. And at that point, he had decided that he wants to become a GE black belt. That was his career's goal. This was a 20-year-old person thinking about their career. All they wanted to do was become a black belt at GE. And that's where they were working towards. Unfortunately, because of life events, they couldn't join GE, but they did end up supporting GE. But going back to culture, right? I'm personally a big fan of Jack Welch's book and the concepts. And I'm also familiar with many of the investments that GE used to do to mentor people. GE used to do to train people, and these investments cost a lot of money. And it's at the end of the day, it's basically cost to the company, and and these are huge amounts that a company like GE and many others do invest. And now the context of AI, and you mentioned COVID, so there's been a lot of post-COVID reactions to the market, as we saw in the last 5 years, where all of a sudden there is a huge focus on profit maximization, there is a huge focus on revenue retention, there is a huge focus on maximizing productivity. And in the light of that, what happens in the industry naturally is most organizations then try to be microscopic about expenditure. And whenever there is expenditure that's being made on areas or topics that do not show direct output or immediate output, unfortunately, a lot of organizations tend to start cutting costs there. And I'm genuinely worried, and I feel that more and more organizations should actually continue to invest in leadership development, in mentoring people, should invest in creating those structures and building a culture of growth and leadership in organizations. What's your experience from the firms that you worked in? How were they investing, or were they making huge investments in leadership, long-term leadership development? And what's your perspective on what's happening today?
I think it's such a relevant question and very timely. I do see, the trend that you are describing in some of the organizations, where the focus becomes on what's necessity, what's core, and anything that the leadership considers nice to have or not necessarily core and essential for immediate profit generation and revenue generation kind of gets frozen or cut off. I think that's what actually differentiates great companies from not so great companies. I'm thinking about the growth potentials with humans, right? One of the traits is the ability to balance the short term with the longer term. That's how you create that sustainable growth, right? You focus on what's needed today, on your business outcomes, on performance of your respective team, but you do not neglect the longer term goals, the longer term impact, because you want this not to be just a one-off success. You want this to be sustainable, to continue in time. And you cannot do that by cutting off the long term and only focusing on the short terms. And I think that's the potential miss and a blind spot for those organizations that are choosing to do that. Kind of just in a general setting. Of course, context matters. Like if the organization is struggling, deeply struggling, right? And requires an immediate performance turnaround, like it's a crisis management. It's not necessarily, just a business strategy. So it's a slightly different context. But those who are not in that, deep kind of struggle, financial struggle, that's your strategy. That's your people strategy. That's the role that HR function, your CHRO plays in visualizing the benefit and the impact of the longer term investment, and really differentiating what is core from that longer term perspective versus just, what's needed to be fixed or what needs to be done immediately. And I've seen, like, from my personal perspective, again, I've been lucky in most of my career to work with the companies, that understand that and, have a differentiated strategy for both the short-term initiatives, but also, the longer-term sustainable growth initiatives from a human capital perspective.
Makes sense. And thank you for that perspective. just a couple of months ago, colleague of an industry friend of mine, they reached out to me, and just for my perspective and advice, where I think they were facing a lot of challenges while putting individuals on performance improvement plans.
Mhm.
And one of the themes they were sharing was that many individuals that were being put on performance improvement plans, they weren't taking feedback constructively, and there was a lot of retaliation that was happening in those conversations. And this HR leader that I know is a very capable HR leader. So but they just wanted to get a second opinion on situations and things. Also, their experience in employee relations comparatively was minimal. And so one of the things that I was sharing with them from my own experience was I just asked that, just maybe one tip that I shared from my side was, a lot of times when we as HR or other project managers are putting somebody on a performance improvement plan, we are hyper focused on the formalities. We are hyper focused on giving feedback to this individual, documenting the feedback. And most of the time, we subconsciously tend to forget that it's just another human being that we are talking to, and we miss the opportunity to connect with this person as a human being first, and we jump into giving them the formalized feedback and trying to read the notebook or the company handbook on how performance plans need to be executed. What is your advice to this friend of mine, or what would be your advice to this friend of mine in this situation?
I think performance improvement plans is a very interesting topic. There are lots of myths around why we do performance improvement plans. There are lots of skepticism with the organization and the employees, and there are lots of fears in terms of I will be labeled as someone who's ever once been on the PIP, and and will affect my career opportunities with the organization, my growth within the organization, and so on and so forth. So it's very multidimensional, and it's a very real kind of issue. I would start with actually understanding the context in that particular organization. What are the fears? What has been the practice, historic practice? Where are those potential gaps of how the practice is intended and how it's being executed? And then once, all of that information is there, addressing that, being honest with people and with leaders, educating leaders on the right process, but also educating employees and acknowledging where there were potential mismatches and, those misses that we now need to close. I think, many organizations do PIP for the formality of the process, right? To be able to legally exit employees who, for whatever reasons, are no longer the right people, in our organizations for their own, reasons or for other reasons. So that part still remains, and we're not walking away from that. But then I think in many cases, what I've seen, people are missing that genuine opportunity to turn around performance. And I've had so many cases, I've asked so many leaders in my tenure with different organizations, and there were always hands going up and saying, I've had people, they're great performers now, because there's so many routes for lower performance. They may have a wrong leader, they may lack coaching, they may be in the wrong job. that they just ended up with, and they could be completely performing and outperforming, in the role that actually matches with their experiences and skill set. They could be having lower motivation or whatever personal issues at home, and they're just focused on fixing that, and it's all temporary in nature. So going back to knowing your person, going back to having the best interest of that person at your heart, right? And having that conversations. And I've also had cases where it was just not the right way forward. It was an agony, for the company and for the person, and a pretty miserable experience. And being honest about that as well, not dragging the person through the process just for the formality of it, but agreeing with the help of employee relations that, it's a mutual agreement that, we're better off, kind of in different, for whatever reasons, right? Like those contexts also exist. But being open, being honest, and being diligent about that. If you see the likelihood of things changing, you're giving this person the chance. You're giving yourself as a leader a chance for proper coaching and proper support through the process. The magic happens, right? Like if both sides are committed, it takes two to tango. The outcome could be a win-win for both.
Absolutely. Very well said. If there was one real and brutal piece of advice that you could share for any leader in any industry that wants to build a strong relationship of trust with their people, what would be that real and brutal piece of advice?
I believe in honesty. I believe that honesty is the best policy. And I believe that, in adult to adult communication, when we're not, taking care of our teams as children all the time, right? But we respect our teammates as adults. We know that they can make their own decisions, and they have their own contexts, and they have their lives that they're managing. So they deserve honesty. And in many cases in my life, I've had those conversations with leaders who were shying away from, an honest career and development conversation to actually tell the person, this aspiration is not likely to be achieved in this organization for A, B, C, D reasons. That gives the person the ammunition to then decide, do I still want to continue growing here and becoming something else, or potentially investing in developing those skills that I need to achieve that ultimate aspiration? Or if I'm super passionate about that particular goal, career goal that I have in life, I can take my career elsewhere and be happy as a professional, as a human. In many cases, when this conversation doesn't take place and that honesty doesn't happen, it's a lose-lose situation for both. We're still losing the person, but we're losing the person with a lot of, bad aftertaste and, those emotions of losing time, wasting energy, not achieving those aspirations. Same with PIP, same with, performance feedback, same with engagement and, creating, the right culture in the team. Like when we come from a place of honesty and caring, for our teammates, the magic happens.
That's indeed direct and very insightful advice. Thank you, Yulia. In closing, is there anything that you would like to share with our audience today that we haven't discussed?
I think, we're talking, it's July. We're in the middle of summer. I would encourage everyone to take time off. We're approaching that time when Europe is completely shutting down in August and taking 3-4 weeks off, which is, a luxury for people working here in the US. But I think it's important to prioritize ourselves, to give ourselves the opportunity for that recharge, to detox from work, to detox from all of the potential issues and challenges and focus on ourselves and our well-being, on spending time with our family and loved ones. And I think it's very important, and I would just encourage everyone to enjoy the sunshine whenever we are, enjoy the summer, and and take time to rest.
Yulia, thank you so much for joining us today on this podcast. And I'm sure your advice and insights will be helpful for so many leaders in the industry. And only thank you so much for taking this hour to share your thoughts, your insights, and your experience with our audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tushar, for the invite. Thank you.